So I started out with a concept, and this was my concept print drawing, just a very loose idea based on the nursery rhyme of Humpty Dumpty. And I wanted to do Humpty Trumpty sat on his wall. Humpty Trumpty had a great fall, thank goodness. All of his money and all of his men couldn't put Trumpty together again. So that was my idea. It was very ambitious for me because I haven't done solar prints much, photopolymer prints, I should say. I am more of a woodcut artist, and I wanted to combine the two. So right there, I was setting myself up for a huge challenge because, among other things, this is the depth of a photopolymer plate. It's maybe a 1/32 of an inch. And this is the depth of my woodcut plate. So I had to wrestle with the challenge of, okay, if I'm doing this in registration, how am I going to do it? And I finally realized that as I was printing, I had to always have a plate of wood and a photopolymer plate. And when I was producing the photopolymer, it would stay on top and the wood would be underneath. And when I was producing the wood, I would put the photopolymer plate down below and then the wood on top. So that part worked well. What I'm playing with here is my registration jig, which I should have taken more time to set up because in the end it did create some loose registration, which didn't help me. Anyway, it did work. I ended up with a finished print that looks like this. The image was printed on Japanese paper, which is very thin, and then sheen collated to this harder paper. That was a learning curve for me too, because I hadn't done sheen collé, and it's more challenging than one might think. I have great respect for Carol Fitzsimons, who does it regularly, who is so talented at putting things in absolutely perfectly. But this was challenging. So the whole process was challenging, not the least of which was that the concept for me was born out of tremendous frustration and dismay, dislike, whatever you want to say, about the Trump administration. Now, taking a step back, I have never liked politics. I've participated to the extent of thinking about candidates and voting, but I never let it be a big part of my life. But regardless of what you might feel about Trump, for me, he was a really horrible person who was so omnipresent from the time that he was selected as the Republican candidate in 2016 to the end of his term, that he dominated my thoughts. He invaded my private space, my studio. There was so much news about him that he was a constant in my life for over 4 years. So it's sort of natural that this project evolved out of that. And when I finally delivered the packet of 28 prints to Carol Fitzsimons for the portfolios, it's after the election. Trump has gone. We're not hearing him on a daily basis. And finally, he is not omnipresent in my life, and that's the way I want it to be. So this is a project that definitely was created for and by the time that we live in. And I'm looking forward to turning my attention to other things. What you see here is photopolymer plates that are picking up different areas of the image. and one woodcut plate that creates the background and foreground. So the woodcut marks in the sky and the woodcut marks in the foreground come from this plate. All the rest of them come from photopolymer plates. The last to print, obviously, is the text plate that goes over everything. It was a challenge. The way you create the photopolymer plates is that you take your image and you print it on, actually turn it this way for you. You print it on a acetate sheet, and you expose your photopolymer plate like this. I did it in the sun so that it hardens the plate where there is no black, makes it permanent. Where it's black, the sun doesn't have a chance to touch the plate, and so the plate is still soft. And after you've exposed it for the amount of time, you wash it out in a water bath with a soft brush. You go over it and it washes out the area that is black, hence creating that etched line or the aquatint tone down into the plate. Then you ink your plate and you start printing. And in my case, I started with 50 sheets of Japanese paper to get a final edition of 28. And I just made it by the skin of my teeth. So that is one of the challenges of doing a large edition like this, because not every plate and every image is going to print exactly right.
Yeah.
The print itself is printed on a Japanese paper called Mitsumata. I spoke with the Paper Connection to get paper that was very strong, even though it is so delicate, because I was going to be running it through the press 6 times when you include the shinkolei, the process at the end. So this is a print that wasn't perfect. I went ahead and glued it up anyway with the shinkolei process. And for that, you lay it on a piece of wax paper and you glue from the inside of the print out like this all the way around. I let that dry and then did a second glue up. And then I trimmed it down to this size because originally it was a bigger piece of paper so that I could have the edges be precise, and then they would fit into the 11 by 11 backing paper, which is Stonehenge. Shinkolei, I've learned, is very challenging, and my hat is off to those who do it well. This is the Stonehenge, again, with this Japanese paper glued into it. And one of the difficulties, the reason I did not include this one in the edition, is you can see it buckled, which meant that I had the grain of the paper going one way for the Mitsumata and going the other way for the Stonehenge, and that causes it to buckle. So this did not make the cut. All the others, I had the grain going the right way, but somehow this one escaped me. Anyway, it's an interesting process, lots of possibilities, and it is, the technique itself is a challenge.